Well, good evening and welcome to Copperfield's Book's Women's History Month virtual event with Rebecca Rosenberg and Cara Black. I'm Jamie and I just have a couple things to note before we dive in. The format tonight will feature between 35 to 45 minutes of speaking and will then be followed by a live Q&A. For any questions or comments that you have tonight, go ahead and submit them under the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. Additionally, keep an eye on your chat box. I will be using it tonight to provide links for tonight's titles and discount codes. So we'll all be in the chat. And now I'm really excited to introduce tonight's authors. Rebecca Rosenberg is an award-winning novelist, champagne geek, and lavender farmer. Over decades of research, she has explored the wine cellars of France, Spain, Italy, and California in search of fine champagne. She is now a champagne historian, tour guide, and champagne cocktail expert for Breathless Wines, and her award-winning novels include The Secret Life of Mrs. London and Gold Digger. And in conversation with Rebecca tonight is the author of the New York Times bestselling Aimée Leduc series, Cara Black. Cara has received multiple award nominations, and her books have been translated into many languages, including German, Norwegian, and Hebrew. She currently lives in San Francisco with her husband and son and visits Paris frequently. So they are with us tonight to discuss both of their new titles, Champagne Widows and Murder at the Porte de Versailles. So thanks for being with us tonight, ladies. I'm so excited to hand it over to you.
Thank you. Can I just say Prost? Because I know Rebecca has champagne right there. So let's do a virtual toast. I have the LA Times mug.
Toast. Cheers, everyone.
Toast.
Thanks for joining us. And please get whatever you want to drink. So one quick thing before we go on to Cara is that this is Women's History Month, and not everyone really knows anything about it, but it started actually in Santa Rosa, where I live up in Sonoma County. And I want you to check out womenshistorymonth.gov because they have something every single day that looks amazing, all these programs. So this is what they say, that they celebrate womenshistorymonth.gov to commemorate and encourage the study, observance, and celebration of the vital women. So love that. And now, Cara, take it away.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, I'm so honored to be here, at Copperfield's bookstore, a really wonderful independent bookstore. Rebecca and I were talking with Jamie just before we started, and we all can't wait till we get back to in-person events. So very excited. Please support Copperfield's because that's a jewel we have where we live, and it's wonderful. It's a place where you can go and a bookseller will say, I want to read something and I'm kind of in the mood for, or I read something like this, and they go, okay. And you'll walk out with a book that you will probably love because it's curated. It's something that real people can curate as opposed to an algorithm. You know what I mean, right?
We get you.
I won't say it.
We get you.
But yeah, so I think I'm a little bit part of the Women's History Month because my book takes place in 2000, right after 9/11. So actually that's history. That's about 20 years ago. And my series, the Aimée Leduc investigations, start in the 90s and now we're going into the 2000s. So yeah, it feels kind of strange to be historical, but I think it is. And so the story begins in France about 10 days after 9/11. And what is very not so reported in the press, which I found out when I was researching, is that there was a huge explosion in Toulouse, which is down south, where like the NASA, where the big aerospace industry is. And it was never really, said what happened. Was this correlated with 9/11? Was this an accident? But I just thought there's not many coincidences in the world like that. So anyway, we start the story in the wake of 9/11 in France, and Paris and much of the world is living in a state of fear. And there's a constant bomb alerts, there's some high ethnic tension. And for Aimée Leduc, November is bittersweet. It's the anniversary of her father's death, and he ran a Leduc detective, and it's also her 3-year-old's birthday on the same day. So when they gather for the baby Chloe's birthday, it's kind of a wonderful event. There's champagne. I know it's Rebecca's favorite, Veuve Clicquot, that she'll, yes. Of course, Aimée celebrates Chloe's birthday with, Veuve Clicquot. There's some from Bordeaux, Chateau Figeac from Saint-Emilion. And what happens is that all the people that are part of her life, her godfather, Commissaire Morbier, Renée Friant, who is her partner at the detective agency, who's vertically challenged, so to speak. And there's also Melek, who is the biological father of Chloe, and Boris and Michu, who are a couple who she loves very much, and they, babysit Chloe. And then when they start to open presents, Boris goes, "Oh mon Dieu, I forgot that, I left Chloe's present on my desk at work," and he works in the police lab. So he finishes his champagne, hops in a taxi, and goes to get the present. However, it's, Aimée puts Chloe to bed. They're washing the dishes. Boris has never returned. And when they find out that there was a bomb explosion at the police lab and that Boris was discovered in the rubble with fragments of plastique explosives under his fingernails, he's fighting for his life. He is the main suspect in this bomb explosion of the police laboratory. But of course, Aimée doesn't believe that Boris set the bomb. He was just at the party. He went to get the present. And all these efforts to prove his innocence are just an uphill battle. The police don't believe it. Even his lab colleagues don't believe it. They believe that he's guilty. And then Aimée, in her investigation, she gets involved with the French Secret Service, who are trying to use her in this investigation and investigate Iranians. And that's a whole story I could really talk about. But there's a place in Paris called Téhéran-sur-Seine, which is a big district with Iranian people there, people who came in the 70s, people who left with the Shah. There's people who came later. These emigres are mostly educated, very cosmopolitan, sophisticated. They bought apartments, they sent their children to the Sorbonne. And so there's a whole part of this that Aimée gets involved in and links to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And she uncovers ties to one of her father's old cases. But all the time, Melek, the biological father of Chloe, is continually pressuring her to move to Brittany. He has a farm in Brittany. And she's thinking, well, am I being selfish? Because it's wonderful, the sea air. He has a farm, there's horses and goats. What am I doing? Am I being selfish? But Aimée's going, can I live on a farm? I was born in Paris. I mean, the farthest, if there was a cafe at the corner, I could live there, but I doubt it. So there's that conflict going on. And the story is set in the 15th arrondissement, which many people, maybe you've been through it, but there are no monuments there. If you go on the side where it borders the 7th arrondissement, the sort of chic 15th, you can see the, Eiffel Tower glittering, but it's really a residential neighborhood. And it is something that has this little pocket of Iranian shops and restaurants. And I sort of stumbled into this area. It's the size, the population of Bordeaux. That's how many people live there. Yeah, it's really amazing. And there are these it used to be the Citroën car manufacturing plant that they tore down and they built apartments. The workers lived there in 2-story houses. Georges Brassens, the famous folk singer, lived there. There was an abattoir. which is a slaughterhouse that was built by Eiffel, the design of Eiffel for Eiffel Towers. He did many of them, the wrought iron Art Nouveau, which when they stopped slaughtering horses in Paris, they took it over, and it's an antique book market on the weekends. Really, you should go if you're in Paris. Just, it's wonderful. And of course, I had to set a scene there. There's also a wonderful independent bookstore that's called Le Divan, and it's very much a neighborhood place. They have a wonderful children's section. They have, and it's called Le Divan because they're divans, you know, sofas all over the bookstore. And I've been there, gone in there on a rainy day and just sat down and pulled out a book. It's just a wonderful, you know, independent book experience. And it's, everyone in the neighborhood goes. And there's places in this district. It's where the cheese shop is that you always go to. It's where one of my favorite street markets is. And I love the vendors there. So I really wanted to write about that. And what, one day I was talking with my friend, I was trying to find the pulse, you know, of the 15th arrondissement. What kind of, you know, when people say, oh, Saint-Germain-des-Prés, you know, that brings it to mind the Sorbonne, it brings the cafes, it brings the Bohemians, F. Scott Fitzgerald, but you don't always, you know, Sartre, Picasso, but you don't get that in the 15th. It's very residential. But Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, lives there. But it's very discreet, you know, it's very low key. And my friend was telling me, he said, well, you know, I said, didn't anything exciting happen? And he goes, well, when I was little, we lived across from the police laboratory. And I woke up one night, I woke up on the, you know, floor one night, there was a bomb explosion across the street and I fell off the bed. And this really happened. It was done by Basque separatists. And I was like, wow, that's great. And at the same time, you know, I know that Aimée as a character has been very traumatized by her father's death in the bomb explosion in Place Vendôme. So when this story happens and Boris goes to the laboratory and there is a bomb explosion, she's also dealing on another level with the, you know, the trauma and fear of her father being blown up, you know, in the Place Vendôme. And so that's sort of another layer for her that makes this so difficult. And she's so determined to prove that, you know, he's innocent, even though everything shows that he would be guilty. You know, but why would Boris bomb the place where he works? So anyway, there's a lot of themes like that, but there's also incredible things. I got to tour the police laboratory there. It's part of an enclave. And I met the woman who runs the laboratory and she took me around. I visited 3 times. They were sick of me, I tell you, those lab techs. And finally one day they go, come to lunch with us. And we went around the corner to the Objet Trouvé, which is the central lost and found in Paris. If you've ever forgotten, you know, your umbrella, your glasses, or your bag on the metro or at a bus stop or in the park, it, you know, it will turn up at this huge municipal, you know, a lost and found, which is from Balzac. You know, it's that Balzacian. It hasn't changed. They have grills. It's quite an experience. My friend went behind the counter and the man took him back and there was a mountain of glasses that people have forgot from the metro, but you have to show your ticket and prove that it would be yours. So I went to have lunch with them in their canteen up on the 5th floor. And I knew that I had to use that in the book because it's very much, anyway, I don't want to talk too much, but I really took a lot of the incidents, the people that I met. I tried to bring out, you know, what the real feeling is of that neighborhood, and it's family for Aimée Leduc. It's also a theme of witnessing. What would you do, which Aimée tries to, you know, when she's investigating. All these people worked with Boris, they knew Boris. Why didn't they witness? Why didn't they come forward? And I think a lot of, in crime fiction, we explore people witnessed, people were there, people saw something, people heard something, people smelled something, right? But they lie. And why do we lie to the police? We all lied to the police, even if I wasn't speeding, but because maybe we were, you know, maybe we took off from work and we weren't supposed to. Maybe we lied about where we were going. Maybe we were having an affair. Maybe, many reasons. So, but when you try and balance that against someone's life and being guilty, so a lot of the issues she faces are witnessing, coming forward, taking a risk, and to vindicate someone. So that theme just sort of emerged. I really didn't plan it. But the 15th arrondissement, just put a plug in there, please go there to the antique book market on the weekends. Walk around a little bit and you can find these lanes that are, honestly, there's rose trellises, there's flowers, there's these cobbled lanes, really oozing charm. And they're left, they're still there. It's not, I don't think workers live there anymore at all. But so it's a story that, so I hope that I'm not just rambling on here, but on many different levels. Aimée is dealing with a trauma. She's trying to help her friend. She's dealing with, the pressure to move to Brittany, leave Paris. I don't know. Oh, you read the book, you be the judge. You tell me what happened. Hi, Rebecca.
I agree, Cara. You really packed a lot of conflict in there, and it just is amazing. It really brought the whole book to life.
Thank you.
So one thing that Cara didn't say, because she's used to it, is that she has written, this is your 20th book?
20th book, yep.
Your 20th book. So please tell us about that, because not everyone knows what you do.
That's right. I kill people all over Paris. So I killed people. I've killed people in 19 arrondissements, and Paris has 20. And you may think, well, she said 20 books. I made a mistake and I set 2 books in the 4th arrondissement. So my mistake. So now I have to write 21 books. But these books are set in the different parts of Paris with Aimée Leduc, who runs a computer security agency based on the real Duluth detective. Maybe you've seen it on the Rue du Louvre. And it was run by her father, and her grandfather started the agency. And he had been in the police, as had Aimée's father, and they both left. And what her father and grandfather were famous for were finding people. And when Aimée's father, Aimée was supposed to go into medicine to be a doctor. She was in the first year of pre-med and found that, it was a tough year. And her grandfather, Claude, who I love, said, Aimée, you must follow your heart, And her father, of course, wanted her to be a doctor, but of course, she ends up taking over the detective agency when he's killed in the explosion. And she turns it to computer security, IT. So that's 1993. And now, with murder in the different arrondissements, because usually it's like her job where, she hires René Friand, her partner. And where they go to work is where they find an investigation, or it could be their business that causes them to investigate. They've been hired. But when she realizes that she has a 3-year-old now, so it's about 6 years in her life now. And now she has a 3-year-old. So a lot of things are coming up to her too, and she's not doing investigation. She's doing expert testimony, as in this story, at the courts, at the Grand Court. So she can spend more time with Chloe. So her journey through these books has been taking over the agency, turning it to computer security, dealing with the men in her life, and always, as someone said, they liked the books because Aimée never lets up and Aimée never dresses down. So, and in this, she wears a black leather catsuit. And it's really fun to play with that because I do not have a black leather catsuit, but she does. And she climbs the roof with it, which is perfect, right? I mean, you want to look like chic and cool when you're, doing surveillance. So,
very cool.
Yeah, I really enjoy doing this because there's so many stories to tell. People say, how can you keep writing about Paris? And I say, well, how could I not keep writing about Paris, right? How can you not keep writing about France? There's so many stories to tell. And I feel there's a lot to mine in Paris and a lot to mine with Aimée Leduc's life.
Yeah, I love that. When I first met Cara, she was telling about writing about Paris in every single arrondissement. And I just thought, well, that woman is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And you have carried it through. So would you suggest that yeah, no, that was brilliant. Would you suggest people start with your first book and read the series? I found this, I've read several of your books, and I found this as standalone as well. So you could read this, Mom.
Yeah, you could read this as a standalone, definitely, because when you write a series, you need to write it so someone can just pick it up and read it, or they haven't read you for a while. So definitely, Murder at the Porte de Versailles, you can definitely just pick it up and read it,
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I know your book is going to be a part of a trilogy, right?
Yeah, it's going to be too. So that is so cool. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay, well, we're going to move into Champagne Widows. And as Cara said, that's going to be a trilogy at least. And that is because there are widows that started Champagne way back in 1800. This one starts in 1800 with good old Veuve Clicquot. Can you believe one of the best, largest brands that we have today of champagne was from 1800, and this amazing woman who started Champagne. And I'm going to share my screen, but really what this book is about is how Veuve Clicquot had to battle all the same darn stuff that we're battling today. She battled pandemics, mental illness, sexist laws that meant that women could not own businesses. She battled Napoleon and Napoleon's wars. Napoleon was trying to take over Europe for 15 years, and she had to battle all of that. And she had started at 20 years old, and she did it. So that's what the whole story is about. And now, for the first time ever, I'm going to try to share my screen. And here we go.
Yeah, I mean, if you love champagne, you've got to read this book. I tell you, it's and you also have to have a glass of champagne while you read it, I think.
There you go. Oh, my vision, Barbara Clicquot. When she was 20 years old, she discovered that she had le nez, which is the nose, a highly sensitive nose. And her parents thought it was a curse, but her grandmère, thought that Barbara Nicole absolutely must make champagne like her great-great-grandfather did. And this is where she lived, which is Champagne, France. And we're actually taking a tour there in June. It actually looks a lot like Sonoma, which is where I live in the middle of all the Sonoma vineyards. So beautiful, beautiful champagne. She dreamt of making this champagne house. She dreamt of harvesting the grapes by hand. And as I told you, Napoleon had started these wars. So there were many, many widows that were taking over the work of their family. She dreamt of having her own winery, Veuve Clicquot. Actually, she wasn't a Veuve. So Veuve, side note, means widow. And she wasn't a widow. So here is Veuve Clicquot and her young daughter and her handsome husband that she found to start this dream with her. And they are harvesting the grapes in Champagne. And it's hard work, but it's beautiful work. And they harvest the grapes, pull the grapes, and then they put it into, this is called a basket press. It looks more like a barrel press, but they pull the grapes and they put it in the top, and notice he's stomping on it. And later, they had in the book, actually in the 1800s, they had a wheel that pushes it down and presses the juice out. And here's an example of a more modern barrel press. So these are the grapes. So when they press those grapes, they put it in barrels first to make champagne. And these are the actual barrels from Veuve Clicquot, and they are marked with the places that they came from. And so what's different about champagne is it takes 2 fermentations. So it actually is twice as hard to make as regular wine. And so the first fermentation, they put it in barrels like this to ferment. And then in the spring, they will mix it together and have the beautiful wine. So it's a winemaker is actually like a chef, and they will blend these wines together to make a beautiful wine. And that's where Barbara Nicole Clicquot excelled, because she had the gift of le nez. So she could blend these beautiful wines and they would taste amazing. And none of the men, remember this is in 1800s, and she's the first woman to own the business. And that is because her wonderful husband, Francois, actually comes to a tragic death, which I won't tell you about or it would spoil the book. So he comes to a tragic death and she becomes a widow. So she has to work with all the men in the factory. But the men at this point are really old or really young, because all the men have been conscribed to Napoleon's war. But these are pictures actually of the men working to put the wine in the second fermentation. They put it in bottles. So that's what they're doing here. And then the women were actually wrapping the bottles in paper and foil like you see today. And then it goes in the Veuve Clicquot caves underneath the city of Rome. So these caves are amazing. And her family was actually very wealthy. And these had several, let's see how many, I think it was 12 acres of these caves underneath their property. And so she would put all the bottles in, and these bottles, look at how dirty they get. They get very dirty over the years. So champagne ages at least 4 years and sometimes 10 years or 20 years. And so it takes a lot of money to make champagne. So her only problem, not her only problem, but her main problem was this guy, Napoleon Bonaparte, because he was waging this war for 15 years. Actually, it was 7 coalition wars against Napoleon for 15 years because he was trying to take over Europe. So all the countries would band together and fight these wars. And all in all, these wars cost France, or really all of Europe, 5 million people. So nobody really talks about that, but that was her problem. And it seemed, this is an actual drawing of many, many drawings that I found that would be in the newspapers and the periodicals, that people thought that Napoleon was controlled by the devil. And the devil, called the Red Man, actually exists. You can Google this. And he appears in the book, and he advises Napoleon all through these wars. So I thought this picture is chilling to me. And here is the famous meme where Napoleon is trying to convince the Tsar of Russia to go with him and fight all of Europe. What he wanted is Russia and France to rule Europe. And he really loved the Tsar. He actually wrote his wife that he would have an affair with him if he was a woman. So speaking of his wife, the famous Josephine, part of this book in Champagne Widows, you will discover that Napoleon loved only one woman with all his soul and heart, and that was Josephine. And yet he went for power, and he divorced her and married a 17-year-old Austrian princess that he had never even met. They were married before they met, and he had a baby with her right away because Josephine, he threw her aside because she was too old. She was older than him, and she could not provide an heir. So this is beautiful, Josephine. It's a very sad story that's in the book. So here's Napoleon checking out the champagne cellars. So Napoleon knew that champagne was an extremely powerful tool against Europe because they loved champagne. And so he forbid any champagne to leave France. Well, Veuve Clicquot could not handle that because she had a lot of champagne to sell. And so she, I won't tell you how or why, but she illegally broke through his blockades and took her champagne to Russia. And Russia loved the champagne. So there's a very funny and interesting thing when Napoleon is marching his armies across Russia to defeat the Russians, and he sees the Veuve Clicquot champagne in Moscow, and he forbid it. So she actually fights Napoleon to become the victor of her own champagne house. And there's a lot of romance. There's a lot of hardship. There are a lot of hardships with, as I said, mental illness and pandemics and like arsenic poisoning and all of that. So if you're squeamish, don't read the book because it's a triumph, but it has a lot of hardships to it. So this is an actual Veuve Clicquot ad from that era. And here is a beautiful bottle of Veuve Clicquot. And these are all the sizes. I wanted you to see this because this, the second one is the size of a bottle of champagne, the second one. And so the largest one appears in the book, but all of these bottle sizes exist. There is champagne, and thank you so much for that. Let me stop sharing the screen.
Rebecca,
Yes.
what made you decide to write this book? You know, I mean, I know you love champagne. A lot of us love champagne, but you know, I think it's great, you know, especially, was it her story? Was it a combination? You know, that's because she's a pretty unique woman.
Yeah, just like you, Cara, I have loved France so much and we have traveled there often. And I discovered that there was not just one champagne widow, but there are several. And why were there so many champagne widows? Because women were not allowed to own a business. If they owned a business, it would be their husbands that owned the business. And so the only way they could own that business is if they were a widow. And so what they did is never remarry, you know, because they've got a business, they were going to go with it. So they could have romance, but they were not going to marry again. I thought that was very interesting. And the stories like Veuve Clicquot, I spent a lot of time with their historian. She was so young and she was rich already. So I thought, why did she have to work so hard? She really didn't have to work at all. And yet I love that spirit that she wanted to do something special. And she used her talent, her Linné, almost just an extraordinary talent that she had. And she actually, go ahead.
Well, just to jump on that, you know, French women could not vote until de Gaulle made it a law after World War II. So it was like 46, 47, French women got the vote, if you can believe it. And they also, 1946, I think, 47, and French women could not have a bank account. You know, I mean, their husband did, so they could not have a bank account until the 70s, 1970s. So that, you know, I mean, It's kind of amazing.
Not that much different than US, do you think?
Yeah, I know we didn't, we
didn't have a vote for a long time or all of that either. And it's kind of shocking. That's why I'm kind of promoting this Women's History Month. We don't realize how little time we've had these freedoms. And I think it's really neat to go back in time and see what women did to bring us those freedoms. That's all the books I write are about that. Women getting those freedoms.
And post-war France, I mean, during wartime France, when you think about, World War I, World War II, the men were off fighting, or they were prisoners of war, or they were in work camps. How would the woman pay the bills, pay the rent, buy food? And so they were given in World War II an emergency dispensation to be able to write checks for the household. They had their own special checking account, because otherwise, but it was very special, and it was taken away after the war.
Yeah, that's very strange. Like I discovered that the widows actually, once the husband dies, they don't even get all the money. They get, I think it's a quarter. Yeah, they get a quarter of the money, and the rest goes to his parents. I didn't think that was really fair. So that's kind of what happened to her. But something occurred to me. I said Barbara Nicole Clicquot had Lene, which was a very unique trait that she had. But what did Aimée Leduc have? Because she has some very interesting personality traits that help her solve these crimes. So what are some of those traits?
I think she's very persistent. And she goes for something. She, as her partner Renee says sometimes, she's a bit tactless. She says what she thinks, which is not usual. But I think Aimée grew up. Her father had been a policeman and then joined his father in the detective agency. But Friday nights, she was raised by her father. Her American mother abandoned them when Aimée was 8 years old, became a radical, a hippie radical. And so, but Aimée grew up with all these police. Friday night around the kitchen table, the fleeks would come over, the police would come over, they'd drink, they'd play poker. And, she just sat on her father's knee, and she would go, in a stakeout, he would put her in the back seat when she was little and throw a blanket over her. She would do her homework in the commissariat after school, because that's what she did. So she absorbed a lot of this, and what she saw was the hard side of her father being a policeman. I mean, it's actually really tough. And there's all the bureaucracy, there's the pressure, there's the public. A lot of public don't like police, and so when he was kicked out of the force and he joined the detective agency with his father, it was like freedom for him. He could do it the way he wanted. He wasn't accountable. He just had clients, right? And he had to satisfy his clients. So I think she saw that and saw how she could be her own person, but she learned from him. And a lot of times she thinks she had to do it like this. Her father said, you just write it down. You look at everything. So every little piece. Later you go back and you try and fit it. And if it didn't fit, and and a lot of times you just go and talk to people and you find out what happened. You tread leather, you hit those cobblestones. And so I think she is determined to do that. I think she has a rent to pay, a business to run. Renee depends on her. She has a child. And I think she's a modern young woman who, also wants to do it the way she wants to and not be dependent on a man. And why is she always attracted to other fleets? That's the, curse of her life. Every Melak was in counterterrorism. Bellon, I can't say too much in this book, things happen. He is also, in Secret Service. So she's always attracted to that type. I don't know if it's her father thing or whatever, but she's smart. She wants to do it her way. And she's also loyal. There's something about her. If she wants to, if someone has an issue or a problem, she wants to defend them. And she wants to speak for the people who have no voice. I saw one time on the Paris metro, on the tile graffiti, and it said, the true heroes are anonymous. And I love that, because people who do hard things, who take risks, who follow through, they're not looking for glory or to be acknowledged. And I thought she's, the people who she wants to help are people who have no voice, who aren't known. So so that's
I
it.
love
She
that.
sort of has her own code, right? People have their code they live by.
I love it.
And she's, and fashion is a big part of her life.
Yeah, I always loved her style. I really love her
Thank you.
style. So, Jamie, if you're still there, if we have any questions, we'll take those since we have 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, I'm still here, and that was fantastic. It was so fun listening to you guys. We don't have too many questions for those out there. We have plenty of time, but a good thing about both of your books is that it takes you to such awesome places for research. So I was wondering if you could tell us, maybe both of you, what was the most exciting thing or fun thing that you found this go round?
Research is the best part of my job, because I have to do it in Paris. I have to take fleeks out for lunch. I think what was really fascinating was that I've become friends with this doctor who, does autopsies, a medical pathologist who gives expert testimony in court. And he said, Cara, if you're going to write about an explosion, you need to meet the man who works, excuse me, in the bomb unit. And so he said, and so we all went out to lunch, and the man who works in the bomb unit, he's a specialist in arson and fires. And so he apologized coming late to lunch. He had been at Notre Dame, after the fire, of course, he had to go and, do the, what I want to say, investigate, it's so detailed what they had to do, with those ancient beams. And so he was taking pictures, and he was, saying, I'm sorry, I was working on Notre Dame. And we're like, no problem. But and so it was really interesting. And he talks about, what he does when he goes to an arson scene or a fire to discover if it's arson, it's an explosion, what you look for. It's incredibly detailed. And there's so much work involved. They take Q-tips, and they go on a street sign and they're trying to get residue. I mean, that's so involved. And I also met a guy, just quickly, I met an Interpol agent, and I talked to an Interpol agent on the phone who, because Interpol used to be just outside of Paris in Boulogne, just over across from the 15th, before it moved to Lyon. And there was a bombing there. And so the Interpol agent said, if you're using, if you're talking about bombing at that time, this really happened. And he said, I have a friend. So the friend called me, he called me from Algeria. So I think his friend is a spy, CIA, whatever. But he said, you can't call me, I'll call you. I said, okay. He called me, and he had been in Paris when that bombing happened. It was in the 80s. And told me. So I used a lot of that conversation in the story. It was just incredible. So those kinds of things, I wasn't looking for that. I was just that just sort of fell into my lap. And I'm sure, Rebecca, when you're doing research, you often ask, what if, what if this happened, or what if that cask broke, or whatever. And then you keep asking until you get those what ifs answered. And often the experts will say, well, we would do this, or we'd never do that, or this is probably what we do, and give you ideas, or at least I get great ideas. So I'm so lucky that I can talk to people and say, I want to know about this. Do you know someone? Can you introduce me? Can I take them out? And when there's wine involved, they usually come.
Yes, I think that's my cue, right?
Yeah.
So obviously the fun part of my research is that I get to go to, Veuve Clicquot. And my next widow I'm writing about is Madame Pommery from Pommery Champagne. And then the next one is Bollinger. So those are all amazing places. But
We
I think
actually have a question about your next book.
okay.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, all
Not
right.
to cut you off. I hope you'll just elaborate a little more. Ginger's
Okay.
wondering about your next novel, what it is.
Okay. All right. This is the, I'll show you the Pommery. This is Pommery. Whoops, here we go. Pommery.
Ooh.
Pretty. So Pommery, what's kind of exciting and fun is each of these widows has a completely different story, and I would not have realized that. She lives 50 years later, and she is into art. And if you ever go to the Pommery, I really highly recommend going to the Pommery Champagne House because they are all about art. So I had to find out why are they about art. She went to several finishing schools and she was really a lover of art. So it's a whole different story than Veuve Clicquot just 50 years earlier. And then the next one, the Bollinger, is during World War II. So that's a whole different story. And she's also during the time, you know how you can't call our sparkling wine, which is what I'm drinking, we can't call that champagne. So she was during that time that the French said, we're not putting up with this. We make champagne. No one else makes champagne. And they really created a worldwide movement to let them be called champagne. And that is very interesting, combined with World War II, and the Germans came in and occupied all of Champagne. And poor Champagne has actually had wars for each one of these widows, and they're not even the same wars or the same people. It's really sad. Lots of war. And thinking about that with Ukraine right now, it's very, war is not something we've had to face. And there are all different reasons and types of war. So that's interesting too, from a research standpoint.
Well, that's a segue. So 3 Hours in Paris, my World War II historical thriller, which came out last year and the year before, I'm working on, well, there is a follow-up to that called Night Flight to Paris. It comes out in March 2023. And we go along with Kate Reese, who who is the sniper, the American woman from rural backwoods Oregon, and is now teaching sniping skills in Scotland at a secret, not chateau, no, mansion, old mansion up in the Scottish Highlands. And it's 1942, and she's given another mission. And that's, my lips are sealed. I can't speak about that, but it's a secret mission. But when you were talking about World War II, so my break from the Aimée books was to go to 1940, 3 Hours in Paris, when the Germans marched into Paris, when Hitler went to Paris for 3 hours and left suddenly.
So I think
the story
I have to
wrote
read
about
that to give me some background, right?
Yeah, that's, it's such an interesting time. It was little documented because everyone fled. The government fled to Bordeaux. People didn't know what happened. But Hitler came for 3 hours. You can see it on YouTube. You can see it. And why did he leave? Never to return.
What was that year?
There's 1940.
Okay.
June. Okay. So you can see the picture of him with Arno Brecker, his sculptor, and Albert Speer. They're flanking him in front of the Eiffel Tower, and then they rode around Paris. After the war, Albert Speer wrote a memoir or whatever about his life, and he put the date that they came to Paris, on that trip. Maybe it was a week later, June 28th. Arno Brecker, in his memoir recounting, said it was June 23rd. Both men were there. You can see the photo. And what makes more sense, which is more commonly accepted, is June 23rd, because Hitler had just signed the armistice, with the French up at the old rail car on the 22nd. So I thought the two men, they never changed their story. They knew each other. And I said, something happened. So that was my what if. And we had it for the
Oh, I'm
American
very
Sniper.
excited to read that. Woohoo.
And so the follow-up to that, it's the same woman. Next year, she comes back to Paris, and I can say nothing, or I'd have to kill you. I'm sorry. But
Okay.
Can we ask you one quick question, Cara? Scardo's wondering, will the series continue after you finish writing about all the arrondissements? Can you say?
I think so. I think so, because, what can I say? I mean, there's so much in France. She could always go to Marseille, a hotbed, right? Or she could go to Brittany, or we don't know where she could go. I think so. Or I just don't know. People ask me, when I wrote the first book, Murder in the Marais, I wrote it because I had to tell this story. It was about my friend's mother, this hidden Jewish girl in Paris during the war. And I never knew, that it would continue. It was kind of dumb luck, but I get to go to Paris. Did Martha Conway, who was supposed to be with us tonight, did she give a comment or a question?
Is she here?
I thought I saw something.
No, that's Donna Conway.
Oh, okay. Well, we missed Martha, but her book,
Yes.
she was going to join us, but she'll come in the fall, I guess, when her book comes out.
Yeah. Yes, I'm here. Is that Donna Conway? Are you related to, I don't have questions, she says.
Sorry.
Okay,
I thought it was
well,
Martha.
that was great fun. I wanted to invite you guys, if you are interested in champagne, to join my website or my mailing list. And that's at www.rebecca-rosenberg.com. And then you'll get a notice when the next Champagne Widows come out. And
Yeah.
we're going to start in-person events, but this is fun. So thank you.
This has
Yeah.
been so wonderful. And as we talked about before, everyone, we are trying to get together an event for them both to come to the store, and Martha too, and we can get a panel and have champagne. And wouldn't it be so fun?
Yeah.
Oh. Well,
thank you, Jamie. We love Copperfield. You know
Yeah.
that. And
We're so glad you're here.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
we're so glad you
treasure.
survived, and we hope thrived during.
Oh,
we'll
I
thrive
can't
now.
wait. Thank you so much for being here. And to everyone, yes, this is being recorded. Everyone will receive an email tomorrow. It'll have the discount code, both titles, previous works by both authors, and basically everything you need. So on that note, thank you so much for being with us. I can't wait to be in
Thank
person
you.
real soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamie.
Bye,
Thank you,
Rebecca. Bye,
everybody.
Jamie.
Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Good night.
You.
Thank you.